Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today, the top 10 things to know that might one day save your life. Even though we no longer live in the dark ages and life is more easily predictable than ever, things can still go bad at a moment's notice. And it's always a great idea to know what to do in these kind of situations so that you can actually increase your chances of survival. As anyone can tell you, there are countless ways in which a person's life can be put in danger. And in the video today, we're looking at 10 examples and what you can do if you are faced with them. Number 10. Stop panicking. As any survival specialist can tell you, the leading cause of death in almost every emergency situation is panic. We can't talk about any survival skills without first addressing crippling panic and how to avoid it. The moment someone realizes things are no longer in their control, most start experiencing fear. And there is absolutely no shame in that, because fear is, in and of itself, a survival tool. It gives us a surge of adrenaline, which in turn improves our reflexes and our memory, among other things. The key thing here is to manage that fear and not let it run out of control and turn into panic. Panicking will make us lose all self-control and will stop us from properly assessing a situation, and it will always leave us worse off than we started. But it's one thing to talk about panic in the safety of our own homes, but it's totally another when it hits us in the face like a 5-pound brick. So the first step in avoiding a panic attack is knowledge. Actually knowing what to do in any given circumstance will raise the point at which you feel like things are no longer in your control. By simply knowing what will happen and what steps need to be taken, we are still somewhat in charge of the situation, even if things aren't going as originally planned. The next step is experience, because as all of us know, experience is the best teacher. We don't, of course, encourage you to place yourself willingly in a survive or die situation just for the sake of experience, but we do encourage you to imagine yourself in one. By taking a moment to visualize a worst-case scenario in your mind and what steps need to be taken, you are forming a basis from which you can draw if a situation calls for it. The more you do this mental exercise, the faster you'll be able to draw on it when the time comes. Lastly, by doing adrenaline-inducing activities, basically anything that gets us out of our comfort zone, our brains release an amino acid that acts as a natural tranquilizer that controls our anxiety levels, our appetite, and the worst effects of adrenaline. The more we do these types of activities on a regular basis, the more of this amino acid our brain releases, and the less likely we are to experience panic. But if you do find yourself in a panic situation, remember to stop. Sit, think, observe, and plan. If time is on your side, sit down and look at your gear. Examine each object you have with you in detail and think how it can be useful in your situation. By putting things in order, you calm yourself down and begin forming a basis of security on which you can then build. Number 9. Shelter, water, fire, food. In that order. Let's say that you go on a hike one day, you pack light, and you expect to be back home in time for dinner. While it's unlikely you might get lost, maybe it's misty, maybe it rains, something to push you off course. But what do you do then? Well, you can call or text someone and tell them where you are if you have a signal, battery, or even a phone with you in the first place. And just as a side note here, you absolutely should. Then you can check your GPS unit and try to find your way back. Again, this relies on you having one. You can also hope that the person you told where you were going will call search and rescue. And again, this is great advice. If you are going hiking, do tell someone where you are going and when you expect to be back. But let's say that none of these existing options are viable and you have to face the facts that you'll not be sleeping in your bed that night. It could indeed be days before you find your way back, so you have to remember the basics. Shelter, water, fire, food, in that order. The most dangerous thing in the wild is exposure, and you have to address that first. A makeshift shelter could mean the difference between life and death in these kind of situations, and it should be your top priority. You should always remember to stay dry, especially after nightfall, so if you're working hard in your shelter and sweating heavily, or you are caught in the rain, remember to take off your clothes and dry them out in the sun before it gets dark. Next on the list is drinkable water. Surprisingly enough, most water sources, especially in the wilderness, are actually safe to drink. As long as it's not a stagnant pool of water and you're upstream from large mammal populations, you'll most likely be safe. Basically, the smaller the stream, the safer it is. Moreover, most waterborne illnesses take a few days to a few weeks before they start affecting you, and you should use that time to focus on how to get back home rather than how to purify your water. Next comes fire. As a general rule, you should always carry a lighter and waterproof matches with you every time you go on a hike. Fire can keep you warm, it can keep you dry, and it can also help to fend off animals. An additional benefit is that it will also signal your location and lift your spirits. But it is in the third spot here for a reason. Despite its many advantages, depending on the situation and the weather, fire might not be that important for you. So instead of trying to light one by rubbing two sticks together like you saw on YouTube, you should focus on building a shelter and staying dry. When it comes to food, you should remember that a person can go several weeks before actually dying of starvation. Hunting would be a good idea, but if you haven't done it before, you might just end up losing precious hours and calories and not catch anything. So indeed, it is a good idea that you familiarize yourself with some edible plants before you go out and get yourself in this kind of situation. If neither of those things work out, you can try eating some insects or just plain old-fashioned fasting. And speaking of edible plants, number 8, the universal edibility test. If all else fails, there is a way to tell which plants are good to eat and which are not, to a certain degree. Known as the universal edibility test, this is a technique that will help you do just that, but you should know that this is a last resort measure and you should only try and attempt it if you are facing severe starvation. You should also know that this test takes up to 16 hours to complete, and even in the best of circumstances, you might end up suffering from diarrhea or an upset stomach. Moreover, eating wild plants won't give you much nutrition, and even if a plant passes this test, it can still have some traces of poison that can build up in your system if you eat too much of it. The first step is to look for an abundant plant in your area. Since these won't give you so many nutrients, there should at least be enough of them around so you won't have to look all over the place for it. Next, make sure they don't have a white umbrella-shaped flower bundle. Poison and water hemlock are both common and extremely poisonous plants that should be avoided at all cost. If it's not flowering season, pull it out from the ground, and if the root looks and smells like a carrot, then it's most likely hemlock. Also avoid plants that have waxy leaves, as well as those that have thorns and hairs anywhere on their bodies. Most of this type of plant are poisonous. Next, look at the plant's sap. If it's white, it's most likely poisonous. You should look for plants with clear sap. If a plant complies with all of the above, then you can start the actual test. Take just a part of the plant, either a leaf or a piece of the stem or its root, and rub it on a small part of your skin. Some plants may have poison stored in just some of its parts, but not others, so if you end up eating it, eat just the part you tested. Wait 20 minutes and check your skin for any reactions whatsoever: reddening, itching, burning, swelling, numbness, or anything else. If that happens, it means the plant is poisonous and you need to start over. If nothing happens, then take another small piece and place it under your tongue and keep it there for another 20 minutes. If you sense any reactions whatsoever, spit it out and start over. If not, eat a spoonful of it and wait 8 hours. If you begin feeling the symptoms of stomach cramps, pains, vomiting, or anything else out of the ordinary, it's no good. If it passes, however, then eat a cupful of it and wait another 8 hours. If everything is fine, the plant is probably safe to eat. But again, we cannot stress enough the risks involved with this test, and we do not recommend it unless there is absolutely no other alternative. Just remember that a human can last several weeks without food, so you're better off hungry than poisoned. Number 7. What if you fell through the ice? Falling through the ice can be an incredibly scary situation. Not only is the water freezing, but you may not be able to find the hole through which you fell in. Nevertheless, you have to keep your wits about you and be ready for what's about to happen. Once you hit the freezing water, your body starts to hyperventilate and you will begin gasping for air. You need to fight this instinct while submerged. If you can't find the hole through which you fell, look for contrasting colors. From underneath, the hole will appear darker than the surrounding ice. Once you find yourself at the surface, your main purpose is to keep your head above the water until you calm down. The cold water shock you experience the moment you hit the water will last from 1 to 3 minutes, after which your body gets a bit used to the cold. At this point, your goal is to get out of the water as fast as possible. Though hypothermia is a great concern, it's not your most immediate problem. After the cold water shock comes swim failure, and this is what you have to watch out for at this point. After several minutes, your muscles lose all strength and dexterity, and you will be incapacitated. This is why it's important to get out as fast as possible. First, look for the direction you fell in. Since that portion of the ice was able to hold your weight in the first place, it's also your safest bet of getting out again. Grab onto the ice and lift as much of your upper body onto the ice as possible. Then, using your forearms and elbows, drag yourself forward while propelling yourself using your legs. Once outside, do not stand up. Instead, roll away from the hole for at least several feet before standing. Then, if possible, retrace your steps to dry land. Now, once you are here, this is when you need to start to worry about hypothermia. You can head indoors to warm yourself up, but if that's not an option, then you have to look for a shelter that will protect you from the wind. Even some trees or a large rock will do if there isn't anything else available. Here, remove your wet clothes and find some dry replacements. If you can, do some push-ups and other basic exercises to get the blood flowing again. Next, get a fire going and keep your knees to your chest and your legs tight together to conserve heat. If there are other people with you, huddle together to conserve your body heat. Number 6. How to escape a sinking car. A wrong turn, a deer in the road, or a poorly illuminated street can all end with your car in the water. If this happens, there are a few things you should know in order to get out alive. Under usual circumstances, it will take your car 1 to 2 minutes before it actually begins to sink. This is the time to unbuckle your seatbelt, unlock the doors, and open the windows. As long as the keys are in the ignition, your electrical systems will still work. If they are not, then you need to open the door and exit the car that way. This, however, will mean that your car will sink much faster, but it will be the easiest way to get out. If for whatever reason you can't open your windows, try breaking them using your elbow or anything else pointy you have on hand. The prongs from a headrest are actually very useful for doing this. Some cars are equipped with tools that are useful in such an emergency, and you can also find these at a local hardware store. Aim for the center of the window and do not bother with the windshield. Windshields are made to be unbreakable or as close as possible to unbreakable. If you have the time, take off your shoes or baggy clothes, as these will become a hindrance while swimming. If you're unable to open the window or break it, it's also a possibility that the door won't open either. This is because the pressure from the water outside will prevent you from doing so. If this is the case, let the car fill up with water, wait for the water to reach your chin, then take a big breath, open the door, and exit the car head first. Then swim to the surface. When there is enough water in the car, the pressure will equalize and you will be able to open the door. If by any chance the car is upside down or you get disorientated, follow bubbles to the surface. Number 5. How to maybe survive an avalanche. You would need a tremendous amount of luck to come out of an avalanche alive, but it never hurts to increase your chances in any way you can. When you are going to an avalanche-prone region, it's really important to have avalanche survival equipment. This consists of a receiver that transmits your location, a probe that is used to locate others, and a shovel to dig yourself and others out. You should also have a helmet to protect your head, as well as skiers' airbags that will help you stay at the surface of an avalanche. Taking a course on avalanche preparedness is also advised if you frequent avalanche country often. Nevertheless, here are some tips on what to do if you're ever facing one head on. Your first reaction to an avalanche bearing down on you would be to get out of the way. There's a good chance that you are actually causing this avalanche, so if you see fractures beneath your feet, try and jump up to the slope above the fracture. It's really worth the effort. But if an avalanche is coming towards you, don't try to outrun it. Instead, move to the side as fast as possible. Avalanches can travel at more than 200 miles per hour, so even if you're on a snowmobile, you won't outrun it. Make yourself as light as possible by ditching your backpack and anything else that might be slowing you down. Every second counts here. If you are, however, caught by an avalanche, try swimming upstream. A human body is heavier than snow, and you will sink to the bottom if you don't do anything about it. By thrashing around, you can keep as close to the surface and to the side as possible. Here's where that airbag really comes in handy. Try to keep one arm raised above your head and one close to your face when you sense the avalanche slowing down. This will help you figure out where the surface is, and your arm may even wind up poking out of the snow, making it easier for a rescue team to find you. Once you stop moving, and if you find yourself buried alive, try to dig out a pocket in front of your nose and your mouth. This will give you enough room to breathe. This should give you about 30 minutes if you don't panic. It's also important to remember that once the snow settles, it becomes extremely hard, and if you're buried deeper than a foot of snow, you won't be able to dig yourself out. You can also get your bearings by spitting. In the chaos of an avalanche, you might end up not knowing which way is up, so if you start spitting, you'll be able to see which way the spit goes, and if possible, wiggle your way in the opposite direction. Number 4. How to escape a riptide. The term riptide isn't the perfect way to describe this phenomenon, and that is why many specialists prefer the term rip current instead. This is because it has nothing to do with the tides per se, and the name can be misleading. Basically what it is a narrow band of water that forms along a shoreline and has the power to drag a swimmer out to sea in a matter of seconds. They usually form when there's a bottleneck created between two sandbars, and the water receding from the shore is funneled through that channel. These riptides can be permanent, or they can be fixed. That means that they can last for days or several months, or they can just be flash rips, meaning that they can form suddenly and disappear just as fast. In and of themselves, rip currents aren't deadly, but if you panic, if you can't swim, or if you don't know what to do, they can absolutely kill. Riptides will never pull you underwater, so remember that. They will also not take you into the middle of the ocean. They might pull you some distance away from the shore, yes, but sooner or later it will stop. In fact, the water dynamics of a riptide are cyclical, and once you've passed the breaking waves, its power will begin to subside. Eventually, this will bring you back closer to the shore on one of its sides. Now, the most important rule, in case you are caught in one, is not to swim against the current. No matter how good of a swimmer you are, this will only exhaust you and you might not have the power to come back. This is actually the main reason people are killed by riptides. You should instead let it take you, and once you begin to feel its pull slow down, begin swimming parallel to the shore in order to escape it. If you're not that good of a swimmer, try and keep yourself afloat by lying on your back and signal to someone on land. In many cases, a riptide will bring you back on its own. But the best way to escape one is to recognize it and avoid it in the first place. A break in the incoming wave pattern is the first telltale sign. Riptides also stir up sand and collect floating debris like seaweed, and you should look for a strip of debris moving seawards. Because of the sand, it can also have a different color to the surrounding water. They're usually choppier and foamier too, so look out for that as well. If you feel a strong current pulling at you, try to get out of the water, but only if you can walk back. If you're chest deep, it will be next to impossible to fight it, and you just have to go with the flow. Number 3. How to recognize a heart attack before it happens. Over 2,200 Americans die every day because of heart attacks, making it the leading cause of death in the United States. In fact, 1 in 4 people will die of a heart-related problem, so this is probably the most important entry that you'll find in this video. A heart attack happens when the blood flow to the heart is greatly reduced or completely shut off. Most of the time this happens because of blood clots blocking an artery to the heart. Luckily, however, there are, in some cases, telltale signs of a possible heart attack even a month before it happens. The most common is chest pain or discomfort. Some people describe it as pressure, while others feel it like a burning or pinching sensation. Another sign would be feeling tired for no reason. As the heart has to work harder to get the blood around the body, you get fatigued more easily and more often. You will also sleep more or feel the need to take naps during the day. Your legs, ankles, and feet can become swollen, and you might also notice a bluish tinge on your lips or extremities. You might also be sweating more than usual. Dizziness or shortness of breath are also a result of your heart struggling. If you notice these signs, contact a doctor. When a heart attack is imminent, you can experience chest pains that radiate or even move around your upper body, along your arms, your shoulders, your upper abdomen, neck, or even your jaw. Heart palpitations are also a strong sign. Vomiting, indigestion, and nausea can accompany a heart attack too. If you're incoherent or can't properly lift your arms, try not to panic and don't attempt to drive yourself to the hospital. Call the emergency services immediately, unlock your door, and take an aspirin. It is better to chew the aspirin because then it will act faster and might give you some extra time before help arrives. In fact, you could take half an aspirin every day, but you should talk to your doctor about it first. Number 2. If you were born before 1989 and are traveling abroad, get revaccinated for measles. Back in 1989, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention mentioned that it wasn't doing enough to eliminate measles from the United States. That's why they decided to double the original dose in vaccinations to all young children from that moment on, and recommended all others who were planning a trip abroad to check their vaccination status, especially if they never had full-blown measles. That recommendation stands to this day. The chances of contracting measles in the US are extremely slim, with only 70 cases being reported in 2016. But much of the rest of the world is still struggling with it to one degree or another. In the first quarter of 2017, for instance, Europe experienced a measles outbreak, with France reporting 134 cases. There were 410 in Germany, and Italy had 1,600 cases. The CDC makes an exception to their recommendation for people born before 1957, however. This is because the disease was so widespread in the US at that time that everyone was exposed to it, and everyone who survived became immune. Nevertheless, many Americans born between 1957 and 1989 travel abroad without knowing the full risks involved. Furthermore, new research performed by doctors at Massachusetts General Hospital, Harvard Medical School, Boston University, and others have shown some troubling numbers. Of the roughly 41,000 adult travelers they surveyed who had visited vaccination clinics before going abroad, 6,600 of them needed an extra dose, but more than half of them didn't get it. Statistics show that 48% of people didn't want it in the first place, saying that they weren't concerned about contracting measles. Another 28% didn't get it because their doctor decided not to give it to them, and another 24% hit a lot of red tape and other administrative issues before their departure date. Number 1. How to improve your chances in case of a nuclear blast. For over 70 years now, we've lived under the threat of nuclear weapons. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union were stockpiling nuclear weapons like there was no tomorrow. Other countries joined in, but nowhere near the same scale. In any case, with the eventual fall of the Soviet Union, while many of those weapons still remained, humanity could finally take a breather from the constant fear and look forward to a time of cooperation. In a film named Nuclear Tipping Point, Colin Powell talks about his experience with nuclear weapons throughout his career and how he finds them completely useless. He talks about the suicidal nature of nuclear weapons and how any sensible and logical government would not use them for any reason. But in light of the past decade's rising instability and suicidal terrorism around the world, he also talks about the importance of reducing the planet's nuclear arsenal. Despite his proposal, both the US and Russian governments are talking about going in the opposite direction. Together with North Korea's ballistic missile tests, the many lost nuclear weapons around the globe, and the outdated technology used in the ones in service today, we think it's time for a refresher course on what to do in case one goes off in your city and you're not instantly vaporized. Michael Dillon, an atmospheric scientist at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California, has actually studied this scenario and has some advice for us. If you don't have a nuclear bunker already built in your backyard, then your safest bet would be the basement. And the more concrete is above that basement, the better. For example, a large office building would be great. What he suggests is to leg it for these places as fast as possible, preferably before the fallout reaches you. If those places are far away, though, you're better staying in your house for 12 hours and then looking for a better place to go. After reaching a safe place, remove your clothes and take a shower. Use mild soap and warm water. If a shower is not possible, then use sanitary wet wipes or a wet cloth. Blow your nose, then clean your eyes and your ears. Be as thorough as possible. Fallout in the form of irradiated dust, smoke, sand, or ash will stick to your clothes and your body until they are manually removed. So I really hope you enjoyed that video, and do not forget to subscribe to this channel for brand new videos every day of the week. Also, I've got another channel, it's called Biographics. It's biographies of notable people from the present day as well as history, from Elon Musk to Osama bin Laden. You can check it out through the icon on the screen now. But if you want to watch something else right now, why not check out another TopTenz video or a Biographics video over there on the right. And as always, thank you for watching.